Once upon a time, there was a little girl. Once her rich father married an evil stepmother. She settled in the house with her two daughters. Their faces were beautiful and white, but their hearts were evil and cruel. And then came a difficult time for the poor girl. From morning until late in the evening, they forced her to do dirty work, carry water, heat the stove, cook food, wash dishes, and do laundry. And besides, the half-sisters did their best to upset her as much as possible. They mocked her, poured peas and wheat into the ashes, and she had to sit and pick them out. In the evening, when she was tired of work, she had to go to bed not in bed, but on the floor, next to the stove. And because she was always in ash, dust, and dirty, the sisters called her Cinderella. But then it happened one day that the king started a feast, which was supposed to last for 3 whole days, and called all the beautiful girls of the country to the holiday so that his son could choose a bride for himself. When the two named sisters learned that they, too, could come to the feast, they instantly began to dress up and preen. Cinderella also wanted to go dancing, but her stepmother did not let her go, because she had no dress or shoes, and she was dirty. And then the evil stepmother poured a bowl of wheat into the ashes and said that if Cinderella collected it in 2 hours, then she could go with her sisters. Cinderella went out into the garden and cried. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds. They swooped down on the ash and began to peck, and so they chose all the grains in a bowl. In less than an hour, they finished their work, and everyone flew back. Cinderella brought a bowl to her stepmother, began to rejoice, thinking that she could go to the feast. But her stepmother would not let her in any way. She turned her back on Cinderella and hurried with her 2 daughters to the ball. When there was no one left at home, Cinderella sat down on the floor and cried with grief. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds, and they threw off their dress and shoes shiny and all in gold. She quickly put on this dress and came to the bride. They saw her stepsisters and stepmother and thought that it must be some strange princess, she was so beautiful in her golden dress. It never occurred to them that it was Cinderella. The prince came out to meet her, took her hand, and they began to dance. And he liked Cinderella so much that he did not want to dance with any other girl. She danced until the evening and wanted to return home, but the prince asked her to see her off. He wanted to know whose beautiful girl this is, and where she lives. But Cinderella ran away from him and climbed onto the dovecot. The prince ordered to destroy the dovecot, but there was no one in it. And nowhere near could he find his beautiful stranger. No one could have guessed that Cinderella was rescued by pigeons that took her home. The prince was upset and went to the palace with his head down. And suddenly he saw a shoe, lifted it up. It was so small and elegant and all of pure gold. The prince guessed that when Cinderella ran away from him, the shoe from her left foot remained on one of the steps. The prince was delighted and ordered to find the mistress of this shoe, and to whom it suits he will marry that one. The parents returned from the ball. They saw that Cinderella was asleep in her shirt on ash, and a dim light was on by the stove. Both sisters went to their rooms, hoping that tomorrow they would be lucky enough to put on the golden slipper. The next day, the prince came to their house and said that everyone who wants to try on the shoe of his future wife should come out. 2 sisters came out, and the stepmother locked Cinderella in the house and did not let her out. The older sister tried it on a small shoe. The younger sister tried it on the shoe as great. The prince was about to leave, but Cinderella climbed out of the window and ran out to him. And she put on a shoe, and it just fit her. The prince looked into her eyes and recognized in her the very beautiful girl with whom he danced. He took Cinderella, put her on a horse and rode off to play a wedding with her. And he ordered the sisters and stepmother to be locked in their house, and never let them out of there. This is how they were punished for their malice and deceit. Once upon a time there was an old miller who had 3 sons. When the miller died, he left his sons a mill, a donkey, and a cat. The eldest got the mill, the middle got the donkey, and the youngest had to take the cat. The older brothers laughed at him, but the cat promised that he would make his younger brother rich if he gave him a pair of boots and a bag. The owner was surprised, but fulfilled the cat's request. The cat immediately pulled on his boots on his hind legs, poured oats into the sack, threw it over his shoulders, and went hunting. In the forest, he opened the bag, threw it on the ground, and hid himself in the thickets. He didn't have to wait long. A curious hare galloped to the sack and climbed into it to feast on oats. And the cat was just waiting for that. He jumped out of the thicket, tightened the sack, lifted it on his shoulders, and went to the royal castle. The king of that country was a great lover of good food. The cat bowed deeply to him, handed the hare, and said that it was a gift from his master, the Marquis de Carabas. The king was pleasantly surprised by this surprise. The cat bowed like a real nobleman and hit the road.
Goodbye.
The next day he went hunting with the sack again. This time he managed to catch 2 fat partridges. The king was delighted to see another pleasant gift. For several weeks in a row, the cat continued to wear partridges and hares to the king. But he did not say anything about this to his hungry and emaciated owner. Once the cat saw a princess in the palace. She was very beautiful. The cat realized that she would be a wonderful wife for his master. And so the king wanted to finally meet the Marquis. The cat replied that they could find him tomorrow for a walk where the mills were. And he himself ran at full speed to the mill. Seeing the owner, the cat said that tomorrow he will need to swim in the river, and then his life will change. The next morning, as soon as he got into the water, the cat grabbed his clothes and hid them in the bushes. At that moment the royal carriage appeared on the road. The cat jumped out onto the road and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Save me! Help! The Marquis de Carabas is drowning!" Hearing this, the king ordered to pull the Marquis out of the water. The miller's son got very frightened when 2 guards began to drag him out of the river where he was basking in warm water. The king ordered to bring him his silk attire. The miller's son initially refused, but he liked the gold-embroidered clothes so much that he gladly put on the royal outfit. The king invited him to the carriage, where the beautiful princess was sitting. The miller's son was dumbfounded, but without further ado got into the carriage. A minute later, the carriage rolled on through the fields and meadows that belonged to the giant cannibal who lived in a huge castle. The cat wasted no time, and what was the spirit rushed ahead of the carriage towards the meadow, where the reapers were working in the sweat of their brow. He asked them to say that these fields belong to the Marquis de Carabas, otherwise the evil cannibal will eat them. Before the astonished reapers could reply, the king's carriage pulled up. And when the king asked whose meadows they were, they answered in a friendly chorus that these fields belonged to the Marquis de Carabas. Meanwhile, the cat went straight to the man-eater's castle. With feline dexterity, he jumped over the stone wall and made his way into the castle. The cannibal was sitting at a large table laden with various dishes. Seeing the Puss in Boots, he was greatly surprised at such impudence. The cat began to tease the giant and said that he could not turn into a lion. Before the cat had time to utter these words, the cannibal turned into a huge lion with a shaggy mane. The cat's soul went into his boots from fear, but he overcame it and said that the cannibal could never turn into a mouse. The terrible lion disappeared, and a small mouse appeared in its place. And that was all the cat needed. In the blink of an eye he caught up with the mouse, caught it, and ate it. At this very time, the royal carriage drove into the castle courtyard. Opening the carriage doors, The cat bowed politely and said that he was glad to see everyone in the castle of the Marquis de Carabas. It is difficult to say who was more numb from amazement at these words, the king or the miller's son, who already did not understand anything at all. The cat took the guests to the table. At the end of the dinner, the king, having eaten to the fullest, said that the marquis was indeed a very worthy man, therefore he would gladly give his daughter to wife. The princess was happy, young, handsome, and besides, she really liked the rich marquis. Soon they played a wedding. So the miller's son married a princess and became a prince. All of them lived happily ever after, especially the cat, who proudly paced the palace in high boots.